You've probably felt it. Not in your head, but deeper than that. A pressure in your chest, a tightness behind your ribs when something false is spoken and everyone nods along. A sudden alertness in your body when you see someone do something dangerous but necessary. It's not fear, it's not anger, it's not pride. It's the signal. Most people don't feel it anymore. Some did once, but they shut it down. Too loud, too risky, too painful. They found it easier to keep their head down and follow the rules. But if you've made it this far, it means that something in you still works. Something ancient, something real. And that's not a problem to fix. It's a sign you still belong to something older than this world. This project isn't about nostalgia. It's not about fantasy or rebellion or belonging to some new internet tribe. It's about memory, real memory. Not just yours, but the kind you inherit. Because you didn't come from nowhere. Your father had a father, and his father had one too. All the way back, through blood, through oath, through fire. You are not an accident. You are a continuation. And somewhere along the line, your people, our people, built something. Not just buildings or laws, they built men. Men who carried weight, men who stood between the tribe and the dark, men who didn't beg to be understood or included. They acted, and they let the world catch up or fall behind. This fire didn't start with you, and it will not end with you, but it does pass through you, and what you do with it, that matters. There's a word that shows up when we trace the memory of these men across time. It appears in myths, in graves, in the songs. The Greeks preserved it, and so did the Indo-Aryans. So did the Celts and the Norse and the Slavs. Different sounds, same shape, same pattern. They weren't all kings, they weren't all saints, but they were all set apart. Men who stood up when others stayed down. Men who acted when others hesitated. And because of that, some of them are still remembered. That word is Herios. It's older than English, older than Greek, older than the idea of a hero as we use it now. And before we talk about any single man like Achilles, Cuchulainn, Arjuna, Sigurd, even Pat Tillman, we have to start by asking, what did that word actually mean? Because that one word will carry us through every story that follows. And once you understand what it meant to our ancestors, you may start to remember what it means to you. Before we go any further, I want to explain why we're starting with a word. Language is one of the clearest windows into how a people think, what they value, what they fear, and what they consider sacred. I'm not a linguist, but I do speak more than one language. And I've seen firsthand how the meaning of a word changes how you see the world. Some languages don't even let you think certain thoughts. Others sharpen it so clearly they cut. So when we talk about the Herios, the shining one, the sacred warrior, it's not just a poetic term. It's a signal, a thread, one of the last clear traces of a memory we weren't supposed to keep. And if we're going to walk the path these men walked, we need to understand what they were called and why that word was used. Linguists have reconstructed a word in the Proto-Indo-European language spoken on the steppes before the Bronze Age began. The word is Herios, Yeros. It meant one set apart, sacred, or consecrated, not just in a religious sense, but in a social and moral one. It referred to someone marked for duty, a man taken out of the common and placed in a different category, not because he was better, but because he was needed. From that ancient root, we get a surprising set of descendants. In ancient Greek, the word becomes Herios. It originally didn't mean hero the way we use it now. A Herios was someone born from a god and immortal, or someone who earned divine honor through death and battle. Achilles is a Herios because he was the son of Thetis, but so were many others, men who died violently but with honor. Over time, the term shifted. It became associated with men who fought for something larger than themselves. By the classical period, hero meant anyone who acted with extraordinary courage, but the original sense of divinely set apart was never truly lost. In Vedic Sanskrit, we get the word Vira, which means man, warrior, or brave one. It's used in the Rig Veda, one of the oldest surviving texts in the Indo-European world. Vira is not just a man who fights. He fights well, and for a reason. He is courageous but also dignified, capable of violence but committed to restraint. You'll also find Vira echoed in the compound world Mahavira, great man, great warrior. This isn't a thug. It's the man who steps into the fray when no one else can. In Latin, the original root splits. The word vir means man, but in Roman culture, vir implied moral clarity, discipline, and martial readiness. It's where we get the word virtue, which originally meant manliness, not niceness. Later, under Greek influence, the Romans adopted heroicus to describe the mythical warrior archetype. This is where English eventually gets the modern word hero. But by then, the word had already drifted. It started to mean anyone who does a good deed or anyone who gets celebrated on TV. That's not what we're after. Across all these languages, from the Bronze Age to the Classical period, the pattern holds. The Herios is not just a fighter, he is set apart. He is sacred, not in the sense of being worshipped, but in the sense of being burdened. He does what others will not. He suffers what others avoid. And because of that, he shines, even when it kills him. He may be born for it, he may be forced into it, but he does not escape it, and he does not run from it. The word also implies action, judgment, and sacrifice. This is the word we're reviving. We're not using hero in the cheap modern sense. We are remembering Herios, the one who carries sacred fire through an unworthy world. And now that we've relit the word, we can begin walking with the men who carried it. There's one more important thing that needs to be said before we move on. Some people get uncomfortable when Europeans use the word Aryan. They'll say, "That's not accurate. That only refers to the people of ancient Iran." Or they'll claim it's been debunked, discredited, made obsolete by modern scholarship. Let's be clear, that is a linguistic trick and a dishonest one. The word Aryan is a valid name for the Indo-European peoples, especially the noble warrior caste that spread across Eurasia during the Bronze Age. It is related directly to the same root that gives us the word Herios, and the same term that survives in Old Germanic as Arya. Arya and Aryan are not opposites, they are cognates, different pronunciations of the same ancestral identity. This isn't unique to our languages. Names always shift slightly across cultures. Abraham becomes Ibrahim. David becomes Daoud. Joseph becomes Yusuf. John becomes Johann, and so on. No one claims these are different people. They're linguistic variants of a common origin. It is the same with Aryan. The people of Iran, whose name literally means land of the Aryans, preserved the term because they never had it stripped from them. Europeans, on the other hand, were taught to forget it. After the Second World War, the word Aryan was not just politicized, it was intentionally turned into a taboo. Not because it was inaccurate, but because it pointed to something true. That Europeans have a real, ancient, biological heritage that predates Christianity, capitalism, liberalism, and every modern institution built to make them forget who they are. So let's say it plainly. When a European man calls himself Aryan, he is not appropriating anything. He is remembering what the modern world tried to erase. He is honoring his line. And he is stepping back into the role he was meant to carry. We don't use that word to exclude others, we use it to honor our own. Because that's what the Herios does. He carries his bloodline forward, not with guilt, not with hatred, but with dignity, responsibility, and truth. Once you understand what the word Herios meant, you start to see it everywhere. Not as a symbol, not as an idea, but as a living pattern. A structure that keeps reappearing from tribe to tribe, from story to story across thousands of years. You see it in the Iliad, you see it in the Vedas, you see it on the standing stones and in funeral mounds. You see it in the sagas of Norse kings and the whispered myths of Irish warriors. Different names, different rituals, but the same man, the same fire. The Greeks had Achilles, born of a goddess, raised to kill, doomed to burn fast and die young. The Vedic tradition had Arjuna, torn between duty and kin, guided into war by the voice of God himself. The Irish had Cuchulainn, who fought his own tribe to defend its honor and died before becoming a man. The Norse had Sigurd, who slew the dragon but was undone by betrayal. And even now, in our lifetime, that pattern hasn't disappeared. It flared up in men like Pat Tillman, who gave up fame and fortune to walk into war. And it burned just as brightly in the firefighters who ran into the Twin Towers when everyone else was running out. That is the Herios. Not just blood, not just skill, but the will to act when it costs everything. These aren't feel-good stories. They're not myths made to entertain children. They are blueprints for what happens when a man chooses flame over the fog. The Herios isn't just a man who fights. He is a man who walks directly into the thing everyone else is avoiding. A man who carries a burden he can't put down because it isn't his burden, It's ours. And here's the part most people miss. He doesn't appear randomly. This pattern, the Herios, it doesn't just show up wherever it's needed. It doesn't arise from values or education or slogans. It arises from a people. The Herios comes from somewhere. He's not invented by a culture. He creates the culture. And the cultures that produced him, the Indo-European tribes, didn't just share language. They shared blood, structure, and a spiritual order that honored hierarchy, fatherhood, and warrior responsibility. The Indo-European tribes didn't just worship warrior gods. They expected their men to act like them. They didn't just tell stories about noble death, they built institutions around it. The Herios, the Mannerbund, the sacred war bands, and warrior castes. These were real, and they existed to form the Herios out of raw, male potential. This wasn't just a role, it was a right. And it was passed down from father to son, not metaphorically, not emotionally, but biologically, culturally, and spiritually. That's what modernity doesn't want you to see. That you were never supposed to think of yourself as connected to that line. You were supposed to believe that you're a blank slate, a floating unit of labor or identity. But you're not. You came from men who carried the sword, men who farmed and fought and died and prayed and passed it on. And when you feel that weight in your chest, that one you can't explain, that's them. That's the fire still burning. Ancestor veneration isn't some superstitious ritual. It's accountability. To live in a way that doesn't shame your fathers. To be the kind of man your son can thank you for being. That's the root of nobility. That's the true meaning of aristocracy, not privilege, but burden accepted. The Herios doesn't just answer a calling, he carries a line. And when he dies, he makes sure someone else can carry it after him. Now, this part matters. This spirit, the one we've been describing, it can be awakened in any man. The Herios pattern is Indo-European in origin. It is ours. But it is not limited by boundaries. When we see that spirit in another man, when we see him act with true courage, carry sacred weight, and do what must be done while others stand back, we know what to call him. We call him one of ours. We call him the greatest honor we can offer from our language. A hero. Not because he shares our blood, but because he has walked the same fire. That is the deepest respect we can give. To say, you may not be of our tribe, but the aura of our ancestors recognize you. And in that moment, the word becomes more than language. It becomes light. It becomes memory burning through the darkness. There's a reason so few men walk this path. It's not because the fire is hard to find. It's because once it's lit, it can't be hidden. In a world like ours, that's dangerous. You see, a man who still carries the ancestral fire makes people nervous. Not because he's violent, not because he's arrogant, but because he reminds them of what they've forgotten, what they failed to do. and nothing makes a comfortable man more angry than being reminded of what he gave up. That's the first price. If you live like the Herios, you will shame people just by existing. You won't have to say a word. You won't have to preach or posture or attack. Just by showing up with strength, clarity, and a willingness to act, you'll make other men feel the heat of their own cowardice. They'll mock you. They'll label you dangerous. They'll call you an extremist, unstable, or outdated. They'll use shame, because shame is how cowards protect themselves from mirrors. But it won't just come from men. The world is now built on a kind of inverted priesthood, where obedience is called virtue and discomfort is called harm. The Herios doesn't fit in boardrooms. He doesn't belong in HR departments. He doesn't speak the language of state-managed masculinity. He doesn't flatten himself for the sake of peace. So they'll try to tame him, first by medicating him, then by isolating him, then by rebranding him as a threat. This world has no use for men who won't bow to lies. And in a system built on lies, clarity is a weapon. But with clarity comes solitude. That's the second price. Because the deeper you walk into this role, the fewer people will be able to walk with you. It's not their fault. They didn't hear the call. They didn't see what you saw. So they'll look at you and not understand why you care so much. Why you won't just relax. Why you push your body. Why you turn off distractions. Why you don't laugh at what they laugh at. And slowly the gap grows. Some will drift. Some will betray. Some will never have been there to begin with. And what you're left with is silence. Not because you're failing, but because you're becoming real. The Herios walks with discipline. He walks with burden. And most of all, he walks alone until others have the strength to walk beside him. And that's the final price. You may never be understood. You may never be celebrated. You may never be repaid. But you'll know in your bones that you lived the way your ancestors hoped you would. And that's enough. That's why this fire has survived. Because a few men in every generation were willing to carry it without applause, to burn, and to light the way for others. Once you understand what the Herios is, you start to realize just how hard the world has worked to bury him. It didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen by mistake. It was a slow, deliberate process, carried out through systems designed to do one thing: to make you forget who and what you are. There was a time when warrior memory was sacred. Young men trained to become protectors, not just of the land, but of law, kin, and soul. Their strength was admired, their anger was trained, their courage was honored not because it made them special, but because it made the tribe safe. But over time, those men became inconvenient. Not because they were dangerous to their people, but because they were dangerous to those who wanted to rule without accountability. So the war bands were broken, the rites were softened, the songs were rewritten. The Herios became a myth, and then a mascot, and then a threat. Modernity has no use for men who remember their blood, no use for men who lead without permission, no use for men who speak plainly, judge clearly, and stand when others kneel. So what does it do? It reframes everything that once made the Herios noble and calls it toxic. His aggression is pathologized, his discipline is called rigidity, his independence is labeled as antisocial, his pride in ancestry is called hatred. Piece by piece, his traits are inverted until the very things that once protected civilization are now treated as signs of dysfunction. And once that inversion is complete, he's easy to isolate. So they push him out of schools because his energy is disruptive, out of the churches because his strength is unchristlike, out of the military unless he agrees to be a tool without a voice, out of politics unless he apologizes for who he is. And so he disappears. Not because he was defeated, but because the world was rewritten to erase his outline. This is what happens when the fire is not passed on. The Herios becomes a stranger in his own land. The boy grows up with no initiation, no examples, no weight to carry, but shame. And for a while, the world thinks it's won. The masculine fire has been sealed in glass, contained, sterilized, and put on display in museums and movie scripts. But the fire didn't die. You can hide a lineage, you can shame a culture, you can outlaw a tradition, but you cannot erase a soul. And somewhere, even in the silence, the fire waits. It waits in the blood of a boy who refuses to sit still. It waits in the bones of a man who can't sleep because he knows something is wrong. It waits in the dreams of those who still see the old symbols and feel something move. Because no matter how long they try to bury him, the Herios is not gone. He has only been banished, and now he's coming home. The world is not well. We know that. Everyone knows that. You don't have to be spiritual or political or educated to feel it. You can see it in the faces of drugged up children, in the dead eyes of men behind desks, in the padded silence of modern homes where no one leads, no one prays, and no one knows why they're even alive. But beneath that rot, something is moving. Not in headlines, not in think tanks, not in institutions. In men. In their bodies, in their silence, in their refusal to kneel. The Herios is returning. Not through politics, not through platforms, through instinct. You see it in men who train not for approval, but because they have to. In men who turn down comfort not to prove something, but because they can't stomach the alternative. In men who have nothing to gain by speaking the truth, but do it anyway. You see it in the one man in the room who doesn't laugh at the lie, in the father who teaches his son what no school will, in the builder, the soldier, the writer, the leader who moves forward without permission. He may not have a name for it, he may not know the word Herios, but the fire is there, and that's enough. They told you the past was dead. They told you ancestry was meaningless. They told you that strength was toxic, judgment was dangerous, and pride was sin. But somewhere in you, the signal never shut off. You heard it. Maybe quietly, maybe through pain, maybe in the gym, maybe in the woods, maybe in a single moment of clarity when everything else went silent and you realized this life is not a game. You are not here to consume. You are not here to perform. You're here to carry, to bear weight, to protect, to rise when others fall, and to suffer the cost of doing so without complaint. This isn't nostalgia. This isn't going back. It's about remembering who we are so we can build what comes next. Because when the Herios returns, the world doesn't just get a warrior. It gets a center, a spine, a man who can take the hit and keep walking, a man who stands between chaos and what must be protected. Not because he's fearless, but because he knows some things are worth dying for. And when men like that rise, others remember, others follow, and the darkness shrinks, and the long exile ends. If you've made it this far, something brought you here. Maybe it was pain. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was a quiet sense that there's more to you than what the world sees. Whatever it wasn't random. You don't feel this way because you're broken. You feel this way because you come from men who carried something real. And the fact that you can still feel it, that you haven't numbed it out, buried it, or betrayed it, means the fire still lives in you. You're not alone. You're not crazy. And it's never too late. You're standing exactly where a man stands when the world has forgotten itself, and now you have a choice. You can walk back into the fog, or you can start living like a man who remembers. That doesn't mean you'll become a myth. It means you'll become a center for your brothers, for your family, for your future tribe. You won't be perfect. You will fall short. So did every man we've spoken about in this series, but they burned anyway, and so will you. You don't have to carry the whole world, but you do have to carry your part. And if you can do that faithfully, relentlessly, without applause, then you are Herios. Whether anyone gives you the name or not, you are the answer to the question your ancestors left behind. You are the bridge between what was and what still can be. So take the fire, walk forward, and remember this. You were never meant to be safe. You were meant to shine. Until next time.